Hello, hello, hello. So what I want to talk about with this video is the human impact of urbanization and industrialization, mainly on the working class, because again, this is the social class that suffers the most at the hands of industrialization. The living and working conditions within these industrialized urban areas are absolutely horrific, like we've talked about already, in this lecture. But the impacts on the human beings living in and working in these conditions is unlike anything that we've really seen up to this point in history, where the environment itself is literally killing these people. So thanks to industrialization and widespread urbanization, there is a massive increase in physical ailments among the working class, debilitating disease, crippling growth deformities. And what you see in Western Europe, which is kind of amazing, strictly in the most morose sense of the word amazing, is that for the first time since post Roman feudalism, life expectancy on average actually goes down. Now, this does not happen for everyone. The life expectancy of the middle class and the aristocracy increases dramatically because of the increased productivity of the industrial world. But the life expectancy among the working class drops so severely because of these living and working conditions that it brings down the average across the board. So some of the human impact of industrialization is, like we've talked about, you see rampant disease from contaminated water. You see crippling work conditions, factory accidents that maim and oftentimes kill workers. Factory pollution creates physical abnormalities and spreads disease because of the low wage scale that reduces people's dietary options, which then creates nutritional deficiencies for them. Vitamin A, vitamin B, vitamin D, vitamin C, calcium deficiencies all contribute to very poor health among the working class. Um, One of the other human impacts of this is the change in migration patterns. Now, we've already talked about pretty in depth how, on a local and on a national level, the migration pattern um, is very urban centered. Mass amounts of people move from rural agricultural areas into cities looking for economic opportunities. But migration doesn't only take place on a local and a national level. There's also massive international migration, especially out of Eastern and Western Europe, as industrialization really takes hold. Large numbers of people find themselves out of work because they've been replaced with agricultural technology. Also, many of them, if they had the ability, move out of these urban slums in search of better opportunities in other cities and in other states. And the main destination for these millions of people looking to escape urbanization and industrialization in Western Europe is the Americas. Now, in the Americas, you have a lot of things that don't really exist for people in Western Europe. Number one is the job opportunities. The United States, especially, is a rapidly expanding country at this point in the 18th and 19th century. So there is a lot more available land than there is in Western Europe. There are greater job opportunities as the United States expands west. There's also a significantly more democratic form of government, which gives the working class more of a voice and more opportunity for social advancement. And you also have periodic food shortages in and around Europe that also contribute to this mass migration. The most famous of which being the potato famine in Ireland from 1845 to 1847, in which, upwards of 1 million people starved to death over a 2 year period, and another million Irish are forced to immigrate to the Americas because there is just simply no food available within Ireland. Um, so, in and around this same time frame, thanks to cheap and easy transportation like steam powered ships and steam powered railroads, you see almost 40 million immigrants from Western and Eastern Europe pick up and relocate to the Americas, the majority to the United States, because again, the United States is industrializing pretty rapidly and it provides more economic opportunity. But you also see millions of them move to Central and South America as well. Now, this large scale international migration creates issues of its own as well. It creates strains on the available resources in urban centers. It also creates strains on markets as American industries struggle to keep up with food production and the production of enough goods for this massive influx of population. Another thing that it does is it creates extremely high competition for what jobs do exist, which again helps to drive down the wages in the Americas. And as all of this intensifies, thanks to industrialization and immigration increases year by year, the existing populations in the Americas react very negatively. You see a stream of xenophobia and nativism in the Americas beginning in and around the late 18th century, early 19th century. And anti-immigration practices and anti-immigration laws become very common in the United States. Things like the Chinese Exclusion Act or the NINA laws against Irish immigration in New York. Um, and unfortunately, this becomes a major political and social issue in the United States that is ongoing up until, modern contemporary history. Um, Now, the immigrants themselves react to this anti immigration push within the United States by clustering together, especially in the large urban areas, New York, Boston, Chicago, Philadelphia. And they cluster together in order to, maintain safety, in order to provide each other with economic opportunities. Also, they create these kind of cultural, what we call enclaves or enclave communities, where entire neighborhoods or entire towns or entire cities will be people from the same ethnic and cultural background. Places like Chinatown in San Francisco and New York, the Irish build large communities in Southie and Charleston, around Boston, in Hell's Kitchen in New York. You have the Little Italy neighborhood in New York. You have large enclave communities of Jews in the Upper East Side of Manhattan. You also have migrant communities of freed Black slaves that move north from the southern states looking for economic opportunity. Harlem becomes, kind of one of these enclave communities in Upper Manhattan as well. So what you have here are, some images that kind of detail the human effect of industrialization. On the left is a condition known as rickets, which particularly affected children during the industrial age. And basically, what this is this comes from a vitamin C and a vitamin D deficiency, which causes the legs of children to not fully develop. rather than the bones hardening at the same rate as normal childhood growth, they remain very spongy and very cartilage-like. And as the children grows, the legs are unable to support the weight of their upper torso, so they either bow in or they bow out. And unless treated, what ends up happening is that in later life, as these children grow up into maturity, the bones finally do begin to solidify, and this condition eventually becomes permanent, becomes a serious, physical ailment. On the right hand side, this is a political cartoon from a famous British magazine known as Punch, which really kind of explains the situation in working class neighborhoods when it comes to the contamination of the water supply. Basically, local wells and pumps are literally, like the cartoon says, death's dispensary. Because by consuming and using this contaminated water, the people in these neighborhoods are, in some cases, signing their own death warrant by spreading diseases like dysentery and probably the biggest killer, which was cholera.